Hi, I'm Kat Sheridan. Welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Wright Gallery. Today, thrilled to share with you our exhibition that's about to open tomorrow, The Nexus of Art and Health. And this exhibition was curated by Sienna Brown. Sienna, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sienna Brown. I am, my day job, I am a curator for the Cleveland Clinic. I was a museum curator for about 20 years and have a PhD in art history, and decided to make a change. And so now I curate art for hospital buildings, and the Cleveland Clinic has a large collection, and working there has really changed how I think about audience and how art and healing can work together. And so with that knowledge, I brought that to this exhibition where we have artists who are dealing with different health concerns and ideas of health. So it's all focused around sort of three main pillars. The first one is sort of medicine, research, science, and care, the care elements of medicine and health. And that can include, care for others. It can include folk remedies, different types of medicine. The second pole is artists who use art as a way to think about their own health journeys, and either their work is a response to their personal health journey or a way that, or they've adapted their work after having things come up through their health. And then the third thing is COVID-19. I mean, it is the defining health issue of our time. And in some ways, it's kind of the undercurrent for a lot of this work, but some artists deal with it much more directly than others.
True, very true. So, we had a great time kind of chatting and getting to a space where you had identified how you wanted to move forward with this exhibition. You looked at a ton of artists. You selected 15 from across the state. And what I really am excited about for folks to see is the wide variety of work. So can you talk a little bit about that before we start looking at the artists?
Yes. So it's really important to me to show all the kinds of ways people make art. There's paintings and drawings and sculptures and the way people, sort of think of art, but there's also environments, there's ceramics, there's fiber, there's collage. There's so many different ways to approach art making and healing. And so what's really important to me is to show all the different ways people can think about art and or show a broad spectrum of what's available, of what people can do creatively.
Absolutely. So something that I also enjoyed was how thoughtful you were in how you laid out the exhibition, how you thought about those kind of three pillars that were holding up the ideas of the exhibition. And I think that's a great dovetail or segue for us to get into the first artist. So do you want to talk a little bit about?
Sure. So on this title wall, so sort of the entrance to the exhibition, you see these 4 paintings by Laura Vintage, and right away you sort of get this sort of bodily, biologic feel for them. So they are of white blood cells, lymphocytes, and the sort of the cellular components of humans. And she's really interested in how chemicals are a real double-edged sword for health. And she has undergone treatment for cancer, and chemotherapy is a chemical. I mean, it's a brutal, it does brutal things to your body, but it also cures cancer. But the other side of it is the chemicals that we eat and drink and breathe can also cause cancer. And so, our relationship as humans to science, to chemicals, to medicine is never linear. There's a lot that weaves into it, and there's no simple solution to our relationship to chemicals in our body. And so what I love about these is that the pieces are so textural. They're shiny. They've got a real, like I said, really physical element to them, and you get the sense that these are cells that maybe are mutating, maybe they're getting cured. In the background, it's really clear on this one, you have this blue mesh, which is sort of like the undercurrent of chemicals that these cells are interacting with. And these pieces are so appealing and they're so beautiful, but there's also something kind of threatening about them. You do get the sense that there's almost a battle going on here.
I also love how much depth is in these pieces. Like, immediately upon viewing them, there's a graphic nature to them that makes them feel a little bit flat, and then you come upon them, and honestly, what you can see in a digital image does not do them justice. My goodness. When you get up close, I mean, the layering is so much, and then you get in here and you realize that the artist has been really thoughtful about how they push and pull and bring things forward, whether through texture. If you can get kind of sideways on this, Andrew, there's a really great kind of nodules that pop up that takes a lot of time and talent. The other thing that I think is just delightful about this is that the artist gives you a little sneak peek into the amount of layering by letting you see the drips on the side of the works. That is a very intentional choice, and it's always such a treat when you get to see it. I mean, it's for works that are extraordinarily layered. That's like a big hint when they give you that little, you know.
And these, I just feel like these are such an incredible way to start the exhibition because it's about her personal health journey, but also about her relationship to care and medicine. And so it really dovetails those issues together. And I just think they're so powerful. And as Kat said, like, you really have to experience them. They're pretty incredible.
They're masterful.
Yeah.
Really, really incredible. All right, where do you want to go next?
Do you want to go this way?
Let's go that way.
Okay.
Take us on the journey, Sienna.
Okay. So this is another piece that I think you really have to see in person. So basically, this is a huge plug to come see this. So this is a glass work by Sean Merchant, who is a glass artist from Medina, Ohio, and it is based on a 15th century stained glass window of the corporeal acts of mercy, one of which is healing the sick. And so this is based on that, what at this point, 600-year-old stained glass work of healing, of medicine. And so what he's done is he's taken the basic design and replicated the lines with copper wire. So that's what these little lines are. And then he kiln fires it. So it cracks and warps, and it almost looks drawn on, even though it's all just wire and glass. And so you can see yourself in it. You are both one who is healed and the healer. But it also has like this incredible texture to it.
And it casts a beautiful
yes,
reflection on the ground. I don't know if you can get that. You don't know that. Maybe you have to come and see it.
But it's incredible because you get this beauty, and you can see the shapes on the ground, but they're just as warped. And I love that you come up to this and you embody it, but you also are separated from it. And I think it's such an interesting way to think about the tradition of care and the historical and religious importance of care. That it was one of the pillars of mercy was taking care of people. And this is before we had modern medicine. So care, was certainly not what it looks like now, but that's always been something people have worried about is how do we take care of each other? And there's always been people who, sometimes they had knowledge of basic biology or herbal medicine who acted as doctors. And so I think this is a beautiful connection to the past and to the present.
And Sean is actually going to do our Friends and Family workshop. So folks that come to that will get to make their own little kind of story and self-reflection. It'll be really neat to come and check it out.
Yes, for sure. And actually, it's a lovely segue over here to these actually several works by this artist. So this is Suki Kwan, who's from Oakwood, Ohio. And we have 4 pieces by her in the exhibition, and they're all really gorgeous and very large. So what Suki is interested in is the relationship between faith and healing. So she uses indigo in her work, and indigo is an ancient dye. I mean, it's made from plants. It's the oldest dye that was in use. But it also has healing. We also see this having healing properties, particularly for the skin. So if you had, say, smallpox or a plague lesion, or even just, an infection, you would rub indigo into it to have healing properties. And it's still used in certain field medicines now. However, there's also a second layer to it, which is indigo. This gorgeous blue was also seen as a symbol of the color of the Virgin Mary. So during the Black Death, praying to the Virgin was seen as a way to protect yourself, as a way to prevent illness. And if your city or your village was spared the worst of the Black Death, you would often make tributes to the Virgin as a thank you, because we see this her power as what had protected you. Now we know that the plague was a virus, it was bacteria that was spread by fleas. But, they didn't have antibiotics. Now you can cure plague still exists, you can cure them. But the idea of protecting yourself and then also healing yourself, but also saying thank you for healing was, part of one's life during this period. And so I think her work really elegantly talks about that in a way that's also super modern. I mean, if you look at, so you get, so I love this one, you've got two grids. Mm-hmm. This is a very typical minimalist modern trope, the grid. And then this one, you go from just the straight muslin all the way down to this very deeply dyed one. On this side, they're solid. Mm-hmm. And they feel velvety. They are. It's pretty incredible. They look velvety. And they're so solid and purely, they look like they're blocks, whereas these you can see through them. Yeah. The shadows they cast are radically different. Exactly. But they make such a gorgeous pair, and just on a visual level. And I think, I really love these works. I think you can spend a lot of time sort of losing yourself in them, which is in itself a sort of, almost prayer-like situation, in that you spend time with the work. You really think about it. You spend time meditating on it. And I just think they're pretty fantastic. She also made, over here, I can quickly show you these, which is a similar idea of from light to dark. And these, they flutter and they move and they feel like they're butterflies. And what I also like about these is, the Virgin was often shown wearing basically a shawl or a shroud, and that was usually what was blue. Blue has always been a very important color for artists. It's always been a very special color. And so these kind of look like little shrouds. But they also are tied to nature. They're also beautiful. They feel like butterflies. I feel like you could just sit here and lose yourself.
Yeah, the soft kinetic nature of it's a nice surprise, because it's not just in the pieces, it's also in the shadow. Mm-hmm. And there's absolutely that meditative piece of it. You think about how much time and repetition, and that absolutely calls back to the rosary, mm-hmm. That kind of prayers on beads, and there is a great connection there, both to meditation and healing and healing.
So the herbs of the rosary were what plague doctors would put in their noses, because the herbs were seen as protecting you from the plague. So it was all connected. The division between faith and medicine didn't exist at the time. So anyway, this is a really modern take on this. In this, which also, like I said, has questions about actual medicine, but thinking about a sort of different approach to health and healing. It's pretty awesome.
Do you want to?
Oh yeah, and then this one, the art history nerd in me loves this draping idea is something you see a lot in minimalist art, I don't know, this is, again, like you can see how she has hand-dyed and worked it. The shadows are amazing, that it's both transparent and solid at the same time. It's extremely technical, don't touch it, and very appealing.
Well, we have a lot of that kind of work here.
Yeah, apparently that's, well, I think it's important because that's, part of healing is the human touch. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're supposed to, when you go to the doctor, they touch you, because that's how you learn about other people's bodies, is through touch. So, do you want to?
I think that sounds great. Yes.
So, this is 16 ceramic sculptures by the artist Brinsley Tyrell. He is from Ravenna, Ohio. He was a professor at Kent for a long time. And early in the pandemic, he caught COVID-19. And it was, incredibly scary. He recovered. But since then, he has made over and over and over again COVID viruses in ceramic. He has literally hundreds of these. And so he works at his kitchen table with clay, molding these incredible viruses, and then they're wood kiln fired in his backyard. So this is all made very close to home. He was not in a position to be traveling during lockdown, but he continued to make art, and he made these, like I said, in this very intimate way. And what I love about these is that we all know this form at this point. This spiky ball. Mm-hmm. How many times I've said the word spike protein more in the last 2 years than I ever have. So this is a form we know, but he is exploring all of its various permutations. Sometimes it's interacting with a cell, sometimes it's winning, sometimes it's losing, and this one, the cell, is starting to absorb the virus. I love this one because it's also become a chalice, like kind of a communal chalice.
Yeah. The glaze treatments on these as well are just outstanding. They catch all of those bumps and nodules that he has put into play. There's this great movement on the surface of these forms that, and to your point, he is exploring the idea of the coronavirus. And so taking one idea and just iterating and finding new ways to approach it, explore it, is really impressive, So
the textures on this is just unstoppable. It's so gorgeous. He's getting all this variety in it, and through a 3-day, relatively low fire kiln process that leaves a lot up to chance.
That's ceramics for you.
Yeah, it's kind of like magic. And I just, some of these, they are so, like I said, the colors are just kind of unstoppable. What I love about this one is it's kind of scary. It has this sort of sandworm thing going on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, the virus is being consumed by something.
Absolutely.
That's, I don't know, some of them, like I said, it's a little unclear who's winning.
And it's also really great to, seeing these forms and how the glaze is applied and how, in some spaces, divots and holes are covered, in other places it remains open. Just has a really kind of beautiful musicality that plays right into the ideas of this exhibition.
Yeah, I'm so pleased to be able to show a variety of these works and to think about, like I said, one concept over and over and over again. It's a great way to process something, and I just think these are really powerful.
So another thing that I thought was really interesting, and is a little maybe behind the scenes, is how they're displayed. So typically you put things in a gallery or museum setting on pedestals. But by placing them on tables in this way, it gives them a lift. It kind of puts them into the air in a unique way. It doesn't kind of, when you have a full pedestal beneath it, it can sometimes weigh it down. And with these pieces that are essentially molecules in aerosol, I think it was just so smart to, the artist really was passionate about having them displayed on tables, and I think it works perfectly.
Yes, without a cover. I mean, these could go free. They could run free, and some of them are so aggressive. So these are great. I'm very fond of these, and like I said, just having this whole wall of them.
It's pretty phenomenal.
Yes.
So you want to chat about that?
Well, you mentioned molecules, so let's do it. So these works, and there's also some over there, double that, are by Andrea LeBlanc, and she's interested in the diffusion of molecules. What she's fascinated by is the contradictions inherent in breathing. That we take things in, but we also shed. I mean, I think we've also all talked about viral loads more and viral shedding more in the last couple of years than we ever have before, because that's how corona was spread, is through getting it from someone else, from breathing. And so in her work, she's interested in sort of the layers of breathing. So this is called diffusion, and so you have some cells that are coming out, some that are retreating, and so you're getting this constant movement of particles, of viruses, of everything we breathe, good or bad. We don't have a choice. We have to keep breathing, but sometimes breathing in the wrong thing can be, deeply troubling.
Also, the craftsmanship on these, it's just, they're incredibly well done. The way that they're pieced together and how they remain together, it's no small feat to create these platter-like forms and have them fire and remain connected and hold the color that you expect, and like how the treatment around, how she's getting that great blue bleed in some spaces. It's all very, very intentional, and the artist has clearly worked years to get this as it is.
So this form is platter-like, but it's also abdominal. She was very interested in mirroring the body in that sense. Like not the lungs, but that sort of like our middle section. And I love it because you could almost imagine wearing them. And they'd be protective, but also a little dangerous. And then she actually has a second piece.
And these are also really smartly placed across from braid sleeves. Like
yes.
They are distinctly individual artists, but they have some similarities that have conversation in a really great way.
And they both are ceramic, but they also could not be more different in so many ways. And just like the way they treat their materials, they're thinking about similar concepts, but coming from it from different ways. And you will see several pieces of ceramic in the show, or several paintings or drawings, but every artist has their own take. That's why they're artists, is because they bring different things to the pieces.
Absolutely.
These molecules are contained. And this, unlike those pieces which are more abdominal, this is supposed to be full, and it's full of molecules. So thinking about the molecular forms, spirals, the little spikes. And now this is from 2019, so these spikes are not COVID spikes, but it feels like it now.
Yeah.
We can't avoid it.
Yeah.
And, blowing up these things we can't see. But showing them to us, making us aware of the invisible things that surround us. I think it's a very powerful message, and thinking about how we interconnected to each other in terms of our health.
Absolutely. Do you want to hit Cynthia while we're
Yeah. So these two fiberworks, I mean, they use quilting techniques, but they're quilts plus, are by Cynthia Lockhart. And she made these in the midst of lockdown, and in particular around the summer of 2020, when there was mass protests in response to the murder of George Floyd. And she made these in the spirit of optimism. So they're called Facing Our Future. And they are optimistic. Their colors, the way she incorporates different patterns and textures, beading. I mean, look at this. It's something you could wear. It's also almost like an emblem. And so she was interested in these twin poles of COVID and racial violence, and of course, particularly before vaccines, the Black and Brown communities were particularly affected by COVID-19 and were dying at much higher rates. And so her concerns were acute. And so to create something that was trying to think optimistically about how to face the future, I think is such a powerful statement. It was easy to feel defeated, and she bumped that.
It's who she is too. It's really
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, this one has, you can see the profiles and the eyes. They're figures, but they're facing their future. I mean, this, like we said, like they're eyes open, looking ahead, and just so much energy in these.
Wonderful.
And again, fabric is, I feel fabric is probably one of the materials that people are most familiar with, even if not in an art context. I mean, we all wear clothing, we all use quilts, and so to use a sort of a material that we all know that has a pretty, it's not something foreign to most people, and to transform it in this way, I think is particularly powerful. Like you could almost imagine snuggling with this.
And that is the other thing about quilts, is that it originates as an object of comfort. And so to ascribe the idea of facing our future and also kind of head on some really tough things at the same time, it helps you recognize that they're not mutually exclusive. We can find comfort even through tough times. That's pretty great.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're going to double back.
Yes. You might catch that little delightful, maybe, I don't know.
Oh, it's really good.
It's so good. It's over here.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, Susan?
Yeah, let's just, all right. So these three paintings on paper are by Susan Danko. And Susan, she thinks of nature as being a place of healing for her personally, in terms of both climate health, but also personal health. And so she made these, they're called Tributary, and they are sort of based on her own experiences with the stream in her backyard. So she lives in Parna, which is I think it's the 5th largest city in Ohio, actually. But, she has some, woods behind her house, and she can sit on her back deck and listen to the animals and experience nature. And that was what brings her healing. And her work sort of translates that for everyone. The other reason I really love these works and wanted her in this exhibition is Susan has several works in the Cleveland Clinic Art Collection, and where we have put them up in various places in order to sort of bring the outside in. Studies have shown that time in nature helps the healing process at all levels of healthcare. But sometimes you can't go outside. I mean, that's the other side of it. So by bringing in Susan's work into an interior space, but you get that little glimpse of the outside. You feel how calm this is making her, and makes you calm in return. She also has a fascinating technique where she uses stencils, so she paints and then layers on stencils, so you'll see these forms are repeated over and over again. So she's hand cut these stencils and then puts them on. And they really, one of the things I've always liked about her work is that it really vacillates between abstraction and landscape. And you know that this is a landscape, but it's not a specific landscape. It's every landscape. It's all the landscapes. It's your dream landscape. And these are repeated, so you're also getting continuity. So I just think her work is something you can easily, again, we've talked about the ability to spend a lot of time with this work, and I feel like with these you can wander these landscapes
For sure.
for hours.
And so smartly placed next to Laura's, because we go from internal to external, but there is a similarity between the two. So it's just super smartly laid out, where you can, again, have those conversations between the works, and you can kind of have that elastic mindset of how are we moving through a space? What is a story? Is there a greater story that I can bring to this?
And connection, both in our bodies, between people, with nature. These are all, intrinsic to health. Having good social connections increases beneficial health outcomes. So, I like that the art can be friends too.
I think that you might want to move to Lisa's work, but you should stay on that side so that you don't get lit from trying to look onto the glass, if you can.
So these 2 weeks are 2 works, are by Lisa Merida. And they're huge, they're amazing. So Lisa is a Cincinnati-based artist, and she started as a psoriasis, but she also has a degenerative nerve disease called SCA5 ataxia, which is not particularly well understood. It is a genetic disorder. It is similar to Lou Gehrig's disease, not quite, but it's in the same family. So what that means is that the connections between her fibers, her brain fibers, her neurological fibers are starting to break down. So she is no longer able to lift heavy blocks of clay. But what I learned from working on this project is that artists have to make art. They do not have a choice. And so instead of throwing the towel, she responded by starting to work with vellum and paper. And she created these incredible hanging sculptures that look fibrous. I mean, they have a sort of, they look like they might be made out of muscle or tissue, and some of the connections are really strong. Sometimes they start to fray, which reflects what's happening in her own body.
This is another work that has gorgeous interplay with lighting. It just, that one is emanating light.
Yes, this one is vellum, which is, and as you notice, there's very little paint on it. She's really let the vellum sing, and it is a translucent paper, so it glows from the inside, and it almost looks like it's breathing. And this is paper, which has been much more heavily painted to give it a fleshiness, but it's also, the individual pieces of paper are opaque. So you're not going to be like passing through the individual sheets, you're getting it through where it connects. And her work is so incredibly elaborately constructed that every piece is so carefully woven together, and the way she's using color is really incredible. So you're getting a lot of, like I said, these sort of like fleshy oranges and blue, and sort of blues, I don't know.
Yeah, she kind of cascades the blue very intentionally
Through it, yeah. And
it rewards the slow look.
it does. slow looking is good for your health. It actually slows your heart rate and increases brain elasticity.
We like that.
Yes. Yes.
Being able to get up under it and see through it. And then, again, the difference between how the shadow plays with that one and with this one, very similar to Suki's, one that is more opaque versus one that is more translucent, plays very differently. And, again, rewards the slow look.
Exactly. She has a third wall piece as well. One of the reasons I wanted the hanging works are, they're so incredible, they kind of arrest you, but I really also like the wall works because they're more human scaled. The idea of it being upright, like a person, it has kind of a bodily feel to it, like they all do, but this is sort of like, this to me is very rooted in the human experience, and I thought that was an important balance to have. Also, the way you approach it from the side is totally different from approaching it upwards. And so you can see these connections so easily.
Incredible skill.
And
then again, you think about the amount of touch and time that an artist puts into these works, and it just gains an impression, really. I love a laborious process.
And honestly, she makes a lot of work.
She does. She really does.
So our next stop are these 4 very intimate collages by Sarah Cabot. She's a professor at the Cleveland Institute of Art. And she's really interested in using collage and chance. So these are from the New York Times, taken during the first sort of 6 months of COVID, when it was, first in lockdown, then maybe a little less, but then we had a winter spread. It was constant up and down. So what she did is she takes pictures from the New York Times and then cuts out the figures and allows whatever is behind it to stand instead of the figure. And she has no way of knowing what's behind it. Or she doesn't look. That's part of it, is that only by cutting out the figure does she learn what's behind. So that's an element of chance.
Absolutely.
But you also very strongly get a sense of lack in these. You know that there is something missing. So in this one, you get a hospital. And then in this one, it's an exterior, but then you see the spread.
It also gains an architectural feeling, which is, when you remove a person to then get an architectural feel, it's just an interesting thing to think about.
And it's such an interesting way to think about loss.
Yes.
And, the profound losses that we all felt at this time. And so she's sort of showing instead of telling. And like I said, they're very intimate, and I love that they're very like you would be reading this in the newspaper too.
Yeah.
It's very one-on-one. And then we also have another work by her that's actually by her and her collaborator, and this is made out of discarded medical tubing. Her collaborator is named Mary Desmarais, and she is an architect. So together, this was was born out of a project that I worked on with Sarah at the Cleveland Clinic, which utilized medical tubing that was expired and headed for the trash. There's a lot of waste in medicine by necessity. You can't use expired tubes. You can't reuse things. But, they were still, plastic, and they're going to take a really long time to biodegrade. So she used this expired medical tubing to create this incredible sculpture. What I love is in the back of it, you can see all the ends of it. So she cut them. I'm not sure exactly what tube this is. This gauge is pretty narrow. So it was probably air. It would have been intended for air, not blood or fluids. And you can see the caps on the ends. And it has this sort of reminds me a little bit of Laura's, in that there's sort of a a cellular sort of spookiness to it. And the temporals are really incredible. And I love that it spins ever so slightly.
Yes. Yeah. A bit kinetic again.
Yeah. And it also speaks to, of course, the immense amount of waste that we all generate every day, some of which is unavoidable.
Yes.
Okay. Let's do hands. So these 4 drawings are by Erin Williams, who is based out of Cleveland. And
You gotta speak a little closer.
oh, I'm sorry. We have a loud piece in the exhibition. So Aaron, this is actually his self-portrait, is an artist and a streetwear designer. And these are made after his first panic attack. And trying to confront how to deal with his mental health as a black man, where questions about panic, anxiety, stress, fear are still challenging. Mm-hmm. And so this is his way of sort of overcoming and processing his how he's confronting his mental health. So as you can see in this basketball game, Faith is fighting against fear. And in this one, he's in faith, but the figures on either side are sort of terrifying. And in this one again, this is him, and he's trying to outrun the most menacing things. And when I was working on this exhibition, I ended up focusing, not entirely, but a lot of it on physical health. And I saw Aaron's work and I realized, oh my gosh, I have been missing mental health. And that is just as important. Our brain is part of our body. And so I think these are such a powerful way to think about mental health and how to treat it, how to deal with it, how to talk about it. And so he uses sports metaphors. And I think a lot of us have felt this way, have felt like we're battling fear.
Absolutely. And there's some nuance in these pieces that when you come in, you'll see some things that are harder to see through a screen, just because the soft play between value that this monster in the back you don't necessarily see as easily. Worth coming in and having a look. And I think we're being called over to Nexus.
Yes.
I think we have to go over there now.
So,
Shall I?
yeah, I think you can go.
Don't go in.
Don't go in. So why are we telling you not to go in?
Why aren't we telling you that?
So this is a Faraday cage. So Nate has created this sort of greenhouse out of this specially treated glass that creates a Faraday cage, which blocks all communication signals. So 5G, Wi-Fi, all of that is blocked in here. And then when you get inside, there is a steam and heat element which creates a sort of sweat lodge. And what he's interested in is sort of some of the ideas behind some folk and pseudo-sciences, which is some people believe that 5G is the reason we're having health problems now. And if you do, then this is a place for you because it won't touch you. However, I also think there's something really wonderful about getting into a space where you cannot use your cell phone, where you're forced to turn off. And then it becomes warm and sort of damp and kind of can be very relaxing. If you've ever gone to a spa and sat in a sauna, kind of creates a sauna. So it's sort of playing on the benefits of turning off and relaxing in a space like this, but also some of the pseudoscience elements that have played into some of these spaces. In a way, I think it's really, really smart and fun.
Mm-hmm. And every single bit on this piece is very intentional. You look inside, and the way that aluminum is, taped down is beautifully taped down in this gorgeous circular spiral pattern, and all of it's really rigid and grid-like, and then you have this log.
This log.
In the middle that then emits the steam. So there's this softness juxtaposing to that very grid-like form. The other thing that I learned and was really interested about is there is a particular kind of glass that this artist is using that conducts heat in some and blocks signal in other, and also how these pins come together and make sure that everything is very nearly connected and stop that signal. Like everything is really thought out and intentional, every single little bit of it, which is just fun to experience and try and think through.
And then thinking about different art forms, I thought it was important to include installation art and interactive art, and art that we've talked about how there's a bodiliness and how you need to experience these in real life, which is true. But this you actually physically have to get in, and I can't even bring the camera in because it'll cut us off. And so I thought it was important when we're talking about health, we're talking about the body, to have something that you physically have to experience, and something that's a little bit unusual. And thinking about different ways that you can make art, and you can explore these questions.
Yeah, make sure you go in when you come to visit.
Yes. Okay.
Maybe over to, yeah. So this looks familiar.
Yes. So this is a series by Yanni Sheng, Faces in the Time of COVID. And what I love is that this is how we all looked for so long, that I got to know my friends through their eyes. And it's actually happened, I'm sure it's happened to all of us, where you have to reintroduce yourself to someone now that their mask is off, because you don't recognize them. But in addition to the uniformity that all these people are masked, it also really shows how we all still brought our own energy to this. And what I really love about this is that although some of these people look a little afraid, look a little concerned, most of these people are pretty happy. And there's a sense that even in the darkest of times, we can still make connections with each other, we can still be optimistic about something, and that wearing a mask was a form of kindness. It was a way of protecting yourself, but also protecting others. And that we all had to work together to make this happen. And you get such a variety of people, a variety of feelings from this. I mean, like, this guy with his Joker mask is kind of frightening, but also kind of funny. And I love that this is such a portrait of a moment. And I think about 50 years from now, how is this going to feel? It's going to feel like such a strange time, a weird time to be alive. But she captures it so beautifully.
I also really appreciate how the artist started to explore the cutaway in a meaningful way, like as an accentuation, whether it's halos or additional patterning, or here it almost feels cloud-like. And in some you have really distinct patterning, like over here, super distinct patterning that is not just a cutaway, or like almost these Van Gogh-ish circular patterns. I just appreciate the thought and variety that the artist put into this.
Absolutely.
It's also really smart because the artist is choosing to display that which would make a print.
I love that. I love that she's showing the matrix and not the print.
Right.
That this is the part that, printmaking is always hands-on and always collaborative. But the matrix is not usually what's shown. It's usually what you keep to yourself, and you show what you print. So by showing the matrix, by showing the things she actually hand worked, and like I said, the matrix sort of always a little proud of it. I kind of love that she's showing that to us. And I don't know, it makes this a really personal piece, even though, like I said, these people, I'm not sure I could recognize any of them if they stopped wearing their mask. So I'm loving that play between personal and impersonal, and how we all the different ways we've had to deal with this over the last couple of years.
Were you the one that told me that, the origin of the word matrix was, no, okay. So I just also think it's really interesting that the matrix in printmaking is the start. It's what iterates and makes prints. And in Old English, it comes from the word that means room.
Oh,
so it's just, super smart connection to think about, all of these could make additional prints or additional babies, right?
Yeah.
I just
did not know that. Okay, that's cool.
I know.
Little tidbit. Nice. Okay, so we're going to take a quick detour back. This is another work by Susie Kwan, and this is a mandala. So mandalas are a traditional form in Buddhism. Making them is a form of meditation. You both meditate on the mandala, but also on the making of the mandala. And in general, they're actually usually ephemeral. You make it, you meditate on it, and then you sweep it away. So she's taking this idea, so it's usually a circular form that is somewhat symmetrical. So not like, it is symmetrical, but not like just one way. And so she's using that idea, but she's using it to sort of tie-dye. So these sort of beautiful forms are ones that we all know. I mean, I think we've all tie-dyed at one point. But then she also stitches it with yarn or string, both shiny and matte. So it also creates this beautiful sunburst pattern. And mandalas are related to a sense of faith and self-soothing and healing. And of course, it uses the indigo, the same indigo she's used before, the natural dyes.
So we are getting close to the end.
Yes,
so if anyone has questions, you should pop them into the chat now. Otherwise, we'll just finish up talking about the art, and either of those are fine.
So these two pieces are by Glenn Holland. And Glenn, for 20 plus years, was a hyper-real oil paint artist. He had an amazing career in that. However, he started having neurological concerns, and he couldn't figure out why. And the doctors finally determined it was from the toxicity of the oil paint. So he had to abandon what he'd been using to make his art. And he had to relearn how to paint using egg tempera, which uses, instead of oil as a binder, it uses eggs. And in general, it's much harder to paint with egg tempera, particularly hyperrealism. So he did also have to change his technique slightly. So he had to change his material. He also had to change how he painted. And so through this process, he sort of turned to comics, which he'd also had an interest in, because it was easier to create slightly less detailed works with egg tempera. However, as you can see, he also is pretty adept at making photorealism with egg tempera, which I have to say is a huge feat.
Yes.
And this one is nature nurture. So again, thinking about how we interact with the chemicals around us. That 20 years of painting with toxic materials in a closed studio almost killed him.
Yeah.
But he had to keep making art. He didn't have a choice, so he figured it out.
Yeah.
And these are, like I said, this is an incredibly challenging way to work. So I'm almost done. We have two awesome hanging pieces by Shelley Brenner Baird. These are called The Importance of Scars. And scars are sort of the inevitable byproduct of a lot of healing. I mean, it means you have healed, right? None of us, I think we all have certain feelings about scars, means you've recovered, but it also is a mark that you needed to recover. And in these, she's used old painters' tarps that are sort of messy and scarred, and then she's further sort of, I almost want to say collaged, although in fabric we usually call it quilting, these other pieces onto it. And she's kept these open-ended because she wants us to bring our own stories of scars and healing to these. So you have some viruses, you have some medical diagrams, and both sides of the work are important to her. So, although this is sort of the front, this is also important, which I love because, when you have a scar, it's because something inside of it is healed. And so the back sides are just as important as the front. And this one, I love all these eye diagrams and all these marks on them.
And what's phenomenal is that these were created before the pandemic.
They were. These are the oldest works in the exhibition, but I just thought they were so powerful and talking about something that I think we've all experienced. I think we all have a scar from one thing or another. I've been on my bicycle and I have quite the scar on my elbow. And these virus forms, like I said, spike proteins, now we all know what those are. All viruses have them.
Yeah.
But the coronavirus, COVID-19, has definitely brought that image to the forefront. But Shelley is sort of very perspicacious in her use of it here. She's sort of foretelling the future in a way.
Excellent language.
Thank you.
Love good vocabulary.
Do we have any questions?
No questions, just congratulations on all of that. So none quite yet.
So we're going to finish with this work by Kate Snow, and it's called Journal because it is a journal. So Kate has an autoimmune disease. I couldn't think of the word. Autoimmune disease. And in response, so she has good days and bad days. And so every day she creates a painting that is the record of her day, what she can accomplish, what she can do. And some days she can do a lot, and other days she can do very little. And she mixes the paint special every day, sort of, kind of on a more instinctual feeling level, and then she does what she can. And these are a record of her ability. And we hung them in this way because they are a diary, they are a calendar. And the back of each of them has a date. So she can track how she's feeling. And some of them, I love, some of them have this really goopiness. And that's an official art history term, by the way, goopy. And some of them are so fine and detailed. Almost impossibly so.
This is another really intimate work.
Yes. And I saw these at Deep Dive Gallery in Cleveland, which is a great gallery. And you feel the intimacy of them. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't know her personal journey, you get the sense that these are, there's something really intimate, and you almost get the sense that they are a journal. Mm-hmm. And, how do you make a journal as an artist who's confronting one's abilities?
Oh, yeah.
There's lots of different ways, and art is the answer most of the time.
It's also really wonderful to me to see that kind of the rigor and protection of creativity in a daily practice. Lots of us would love to have a daily practice, but just can't get there. And this artist, even through a health issue that would push a lot of other folks not to, has persisted through that and continues to make every single day. And I just think that that's gorgeous.
It really is.
So I thought this was a fitting end to thinking about how art and health work together.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining
Thank
us. A big thank you to the Governor's Office, the Legislature, the Ohio Arts Council's board who supports the Ohio Arts Council, this great space, and of course, Ohio artists. Thanks everybody, have a great day.